MEDA works at the intersection of SMEs, fund managers, capital market, the ecosystem. We're one of the few players who actually looks at the entire spectrum. We consider ourselves not as capital allocators, but as an ecosystem builder. And let me explain a little bit what that means. That means we don't do it alone. We have to work in partnership with others to make sure that everything that the ecosystem needs to actually build itself and transform the SMEs can actually happen. So I think for us, that's what we've learned over 7 decades of existence, working not only in Africa, but in other emerging markets, where we have seen real transformation take place in Latin America and the Caribbean and in Southeast Asia. Blended finance brings, I would say, different kinds of asset classes to the table. So you have some grant funding, because parts of this ecosystem just needs grant funding. There's nothing you can do about that. You know, people need to be educated, people need to go to school, people need the basics, right? Then they're able to then, in a very intentional manner, fit into the value chain and the ecosystem. So why we say blended finance is important is that you have to make some of that grant finance with some of that repayable capital. So we are doing it at the entry point of the ecosystem, but it is not about keeping people there. It's about graduating along that ecosystem. There is a continuum we're working with. So first is that piece where just you need your grant support to grant help. After that is that blend of grant plus finance, but the finance has to be affordable. One of the biggest problems with financing anything in Africa is the cost of money. The cost of money is too high. Nobody in the global north ever built what they had by taking money from banks at the cost that banks are offering it. They will never have grown. So you need to then move the businesses to grow, build that SME sector. And not everybody is going to become a unicorn on this African continent. You know, I normally say Africa needs camels. Our SMEs are camels, not necessarily unicorns. They're family businesses that may struggle through 2 or 3 generations. But what can we do, as the AVCA say, to create champion businesses across the continent, right? So I think for us, we focus on blended finance because it is beyond capital, takes a holistic view, and it's an ecosystem approach. You know, we started the MasterCard Foundation African Growth Fund as the fund manager in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation and other consortium partners in 2022. I will go from 2022 to date, and then I'll go backwards. Where we were in 2022 and where we are today, I can say, wow, what have we changed? You know, we have Aroa Capital in the market, we have Django in the market, we have Tree Ventures in the market, we have Front End in the market. I just give me a 535, I'm not naming, Sabu Capital. These are all young women who were never in the market. So let me start with that we have created a class of capital allocators on the continent that were not there 4 years ago. And for me, that is extremely important because the agency and the power sits with who holds the purse, right? I just came off a panel and all the big purse holders were there and everything. And so they have power. And we are talking about how do we reverse that power because it is an unhealthy dependency. It was needed for the DFIs to be there in Africa. And so with the MasterCard Foundation African Growth Fund, I think there are 3 things. It is not just a fund. It was something that came to the market, number 1, to bring capital to these capital allocators I have just listed, and we want to bring many more into the market. Number 2, it was to build the SME ecosystem. We need to work with the SMEs so they're investment ready, they're ready for growth, they can grow, they can merge, they can do what they like, but it's building those champion SMEs across the continent. And number 3 was to actually see how do we influence the ecosystem at the policy level. And how we did that is one of the prerequisites for the MasterCard Foundation African Growth Fund was that for you to participate, you needed to domicile on the African continent. And whilst people hesitated at the beginning, we are so excited and proud that we stayed the course. Today, every fund participating is either co-domiciled, parallel domiciliation, or is domiciled on the African continent. And you know what domiciliation means. Domiciliation is its own ecosystem. I will use Luxembourg. Luxembourg is a big economy today because people domicile there. You build your lawyers, your banks, your hotels, everything, your education system. So why should we not build that on the African continent? So we're really proud to be part of the MasterCard Foundation African Growth Fund. We're really grateful that the MasterCard Foundation as an organization took that first bold step and that bold risk. I think the most important thing is that the risk is global. People shouldn't specify it to Africa. The risk that is going around is global. And I think actually the opportunity is Africa within this magnitude of risk that's going on. The opportunity to create engines of growth, jobs and businesses lies in this continent, on this continent. Many countries, not that they've maxed out, but that opportunity for growth is not there. And that's why I say the youth of Africa need to get into good, dignified, decent paying jobs. Because without those jobs, there will be no pension plans. With no pension plans, there's no domestic capital. If there's no domestic capital, then we're in the fourth era of colonization that will just keep giving to this continent. Right? So it's a cycle that needs to be broken. We need domestic capital. For domestic capital, if we're looking at pension funds and insurance funds, we need good jobs that pay into to build these pension funds so that those pension funds can turn around and continue to stimulate the economy. The DFIs have done a lot and they will continue to do, but we need the DFIs to step in and take a role of actually de-risking some of the domestic capital opportunities, even our high net worth individuals. So, my final word is that risk is global. Don't specify it, don't pin it to Africa alone. Opportunity is greatest in Africa.